We have gotten 50% of the adult cigarette smokers in America to quit smoking. Most addictive drug we know of, 50% of the adults who smoked have quit in the last 10 years in America. Now, how did we accomplish this? Well, we outlawed cigarettes, we locked up people, and we built prison. No, that isn't what we did. We educated people, gave them the right information out there.
It depends on how you define legalization. I don't think you should discriminate against drugs. All drugs, if improperly used, can cause serious injury, including death. Even aspirin, it's a very popular drug. Marijuana has a myriad of uses, and it can't kill you. You cannot overdose on marijuana. Most people don't realize that, but you can't. You can overdose on water, you can overdose on aspirin, you can overdose on almost anything, but not pot.
Heroin, methamphetamine, LSD, marijuana, all of these drugs have so much potential to do harm to individuals and then likewise to society that they absolutely must be regulated and controlled.
Legalization is the only way to do it. You can't do half measures. You can't legalize one thing and not another. We need to legalize it, regulate and control it to where we have some control, where the control is in the hands of the government, not in the hands of criminals. So basically, that's very simple. Would you rather buy your drugs from the government or buy them from a black market criminal and you know nothing about the quality? People are going to do drugs anyway. So let's accept that as a given, and let's try to keep them safe from themselves, so to speak. At least they can use quality drugs that we know the purity of, and we also then will know how big a problem we have, and we can address it medically.
It's better to control and regulate a substance than it is to prohibit it. If you're a kid and you go out years ago and you drank a six-pack of beer in a night, you know how you're going to feel because it's regulated. And if you did the same thing the next weekend, well, I'm going to feel the same way I did last weekend, and maybe that's not such a good idea. But with no regulation or control of drugs, you don't know, even if you're getting your supply from the same place you did the week before, you don't know it's the same substance. You don't know whether it's contaminated. And it would be better to regulate it so a guy can see, this is what I'm consuming and make an intelligent decision as to whether or not that's a good idea.
I feel almost like a traitor, but I also feel like a patriot. Because for 30 years I was in the drug war, and I did my absolute best to win, but we didn't win. So eventually you have to accept that you're not going to win. So do you keep hurting your country, or you do something patriotic and try to help it? I feel, and I was torn between making the decision, and I felt, between the difference of a patriot or not. And so I feel like it's patriotic. I think it will help my country, and that's why I'm doing it.
I was playing bridge one night with people of the church that I belong to and was a regular member of, and I'm reading day after day in the newspaper of how many people are being killed in Chicago. We would have 12 kids killed in a weekend in drug turf wars in Chicago. And then I would listen to the politicians, Republicans and Democrats, addressing the problem, saying the same thing. We need to get tougher, crack down harder, build more prisons, 3-time loser laws. We got to show them who's the boss. And none of it made any sense because the problems were getting worse as they advocated those solutions. And because of that, I decided I was going to run for state's attorney of Cook County on the idea of drug policy reform to eliminate addict crime and turf war crime that was filling the prisons, that was making neighborhoods unlivable, that was putting more drugs and stronger drugs on the corners of Chicago, making every neighborhood unsafe.
Ask Jack Cole. I said, Jack, he works 80 hours a week. I mean, he lives and breathes and eats LEAP. And I said, how can you do it? What are you doing? And he says, I'm atoning for all the lives I ruined. And I hear that over and over they look back and what they did, and they saw that there was a party to creating this monster. It is an atonement.
I don't think it's going to be a gradual attrition. I think it's going to be a policy that walks off the end of the cliff and just drops to the ground and dies. And the reason is the economics of the policy cause so many problems, so many expensive problems, such horrendous grief problems, crime, gangs, prisons, taxes, deficits, AIDS, healthcare, trade imbalance, corruption, the funding of terrorism around the world, that it's going to come to a sudden stop like a car crashing into a wall.
The drug war will probably end dramatically, and it's very easy to end it. All you got to do is end it. And when you make it legal, then it's over, and we can start and try to fix the problems that has happened.
One of the interesting things that we here in the States like to take credit for, because every great idea, we invented the wheel. You're aware of that, aren't you? Us Americans, we invented everything. Doesn't make any difference the name of the person that invented it or what country they lived in. If it was invented, we invented it. We like to take credit because Ronald Reagan brought down the Berlin Wall. Well, I like to tell people there's only one reason the Berlin Wall came down. There's only one reason the Soviet Union fell apart, and that is because that system doesn't work. If in fact it worked, it would still be flourishing and going on, and the people would still be doing it. And even if some of the people didn't like it, if it worked for most of the people, it would continue.
Politicians are silent on this. They do not want to talk about a policy which is a failure, because the 3 hardest words to say in English: I was wrong. And politicians could not spell I was wrong if their mother's life depended on it.
I have no patience with stupidity and stupid policies. I'm sure there's a nicer way that I could state this, but there really isn't. I mean, if you follow a policy for 80 years and if things only get worse, they don't get better, what do you call it when you don't sit down and recognize the fact and do something about it to change it? And unfortunately, we're changing the whole world with our policy.
It's the United States principally who has exported these drugs around, not the drugs, but effectively the drugs, but prohibition around the world, that's helped make drugs the scourge of the world.
One problem is our drug problem, and that's the use and abuse and addiction to these drugs. The other separate problem that we have created is the drug business problem. The gangsters that roam our streets, the mobs that control this activity, the terrorists that fund their activities by selling these drugs in an illegal marketplace.
And in 1974, cocaine was selling for $105 a gram and about 60% pure. Today, it's half the price and twice the purity. There's no way we can say we're winning the war on drugs, considering that.
Well, I would urge them to experiment, to try things that may or may not work. Follow the Swiss lead, where they tried something which didn't work, which is Needle Park, but out of that came the Swiss heroin maintenance program, which does work wonderfully. Follow that lead and try things. If it doesn't work, then abandon it. But at least show the rest of the world, as the Swiss have, that there are other ways to do it besides incarcerate and incarcerate and incarcerate.
And for God's sake, don't follow what we did. Do not follow what we did. It's a known failure. Don't let us influence you into following the same thing we tried. No matter how noble the intent is, it didn't work. And if it doesn't work, you have to realize the realities and hold people accountable for their actions, not their choices.